So, hi everybody, welcome to the Museum of Glass. Our guest artist today is Mr. Albert Paley, the man in the gray shirt. And he's a sculptor, works mostly in metal, but he does also sometimes work in metal and glass. We have a beautiful exhibition of his metal and glass sculptures across the hall. So today, he's going to be working with our resident team of glassblowers. Mr. Paley is not a glassmaker himself, so when we have a guest artist who's not a glassmaker, they come up with a design, and our guys make their design for them. So when Mr. Paley works in metal and glass, we make the glass pieces first, and then he takes it back to his studio and designs the metal around the glass object. So the thing that's going to happen today is we'll be making the glass part. So just to give you a little introduction to how this place works, everything that we do starts out in our glass furnaces. The glass furnaces are the ones with the square holes in the steel wall and the door closed. Behind those doors, there's a big ceramic tank, and in that ceramic tank is 1,000 pounds of molten glass in each furnace. If you look up on the big screen, you'll see a diagram. That's what it looks like behind that door. We keep the molten glass at 2,100 degrees, and at that temperature, the glass has the consistency of honey. So if you can imagine a giant crock pot full of honey, that's what our glass furnace is like. When we want to get it out to make stuff, we take one of those steel pipes and we dip it into the molten glass like you dip one of those wooden honey dippers into a jar of honey. We dip it in, twirl it around, a little bit of the molten glass sticks to the end of the pipe. Today, everything we're going to make is going to be solid. We're not going to be blowing anything. So they've just got the steel pipes and they've got the glass on the end. The glass that we're working with is clear. It has no color. The orange color that you're seeing is the glow from the heat. When glass is hot, no matter what color it is, it glows orange. When it cools down, the orange glow disappears and you see the natural color of the glass. So you see Sarah over there on the right. She's got that big orange-looking ball. That glass is clear, just like the glass I'm holding. It's just very hot, so what you're seeing is the glow. Does anybody have any questions so far? Yes, sir. So right now, Mr. Paley is setting up a steel mold. We're going to pour molten glass into that steel mold to make each of the forms. We're going to make 2 different forms and then join them together. Take one of those pipes, and we dip it in the glass, and we get a little ball around the end, and the pipe is like a big straw. And when we blow through it, it blows up like a balloon. Make Does anybody have any questions? Just to give you a little background into Mr. Paley and his work, we have a little video. Can we play Meet the Artist?
Yeah, I'm Albert Paley. I live in Rochester, New York, where I have my main studio. I have 18 people full-time. We're involved primarily in large-scale metal sculpture. And in addition to that, we're involved with exhibition pieces, which employ forging, fabrication, and various metalworking processes. Yeah, the inspiration for the work is kind of difficult to figure out because obviously it's based on everything. My own sensibilities plus what I've experienced along the way. My work has a tendency to deal with complexity. With large-scale pieces, everything has to be resolved within the model or the maquette before we commit to the large scale. When I'm doing exhibition pieces, which are more from my own experience trying to understand form, there's usually no drawings. We just start and the work is composed as you go. Yeah, I'm Albert Paley. I live in Rochester, New York, where I have my main studio. I have 18 people full-time. We're involved primarily in large-scale metal sculpture. And in addition to that, we're involved with exhibition pieces, which employ forging, fabrication, and various metalworking processes. Yeah, the inspiration for the work is kind of difficult to figure out because obviously it's based on everything. My own sensibilities plus what I've experienced along the way. My work has a tendency to deal with complexity. With large-scale pieces, everything has to be resolved within the model or the maquette before we commit to the large scale. When I'm doing exhibition pieces, which are more from my own experience trying to understand form, there's usually no drawings. We just start.
So we're going to use the piece that Ben in the center is making as kind of a handle to hold, to pick up the cast form. And we're going to transfer the squarish post that Ben made to the rod that Gabe has over there. So Gabe is making what we call the punty. And that's just going to act as a temporary handle to hold the sculpture while we assemble it. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir. How long is the process? Well, I think it's going to be like an hour and a half to 2 hours of making the glass, but the glass is only the first part. So he's going to take it back to his studio and he's going to design the metal that goes around the glass, and that'll happen over a period of weeks. So you'll see the glass part completed here, but not how the whole sculpture will look. Can we put up some of his glass and metal sculptures? Alicia? There. So if you look up on the big screen, you'll see some examples. So we're just making the glass parts today. The metal part, he'll design, he hasn't even designed the metal parts, he'll design them after he sees what the glass parts look like. Yeah. He's making a mold, pour molten glass into that mold to make the main body of the sculpture. So he's kind of assembling it out of metal parts and fill that up. No. Nope. He's just winging it.
So where's the glass going to come from?
There's a big ceramic pot behind that door with 1,000 pounds of molten glass.
Well, he's moving. To me, that's not a problem. Because if you measure, that's more than they need.
I've probably seen 50 artists here, and everybody has got a different technique. There's no artist do exactly the same thing.
Everybody's got their own.
So now you see the beginning. So it looks to me like he's got to pour it in and it can't overflow. That would be a
Well,
problem.
he's tipping it up a little. He wants kind of a wedge shape,
Right.
so the glass is going to level itself. That's why he's tipping it up.
Yeah, this thing's on an angle.
But he can't overfill it because then.
It's not going to flow
No.
out of it.
They won't over. We're working with pros.
That's what I mean by experience. I mean, if you were a beginner, you wouldn't know.
I don't know. They one of these be here.
Oh, wait a minute, it's got a week, at least a week for.
Yeah.
He'll go home.
You guys have any questions? So right now, Ben, tall guy in the red and white trucker's cap, is preheating our mold. So we've kind of jury-rigged this mold with pieces of angle iron and a few clamps. So we're making these spontaneously. There was no original plan. Mr. Paley's making it up as he goes. Do you guys have any questions? With Julie? No, I don't think so. Yes, sir. And then he got a big commission for the Renwood Gallery in Smithsonian, and they moved on to making large scale metal stuff. He has a whole metal studio with 18 people. Yes, sir.
That TV go on those then, and then it goes on the big TV.
Yeah, it goes on both TVs at once. Then it goes to the internet.
Oh man,
So watch it from home.
how about that? We'll have lunch.
You guys have any questions? Making a sculpture, an abstract sculpture.
Okay. I didn't know if there was a particular name for it or.
No name.
Okay.
Well, it's pretty close to normal everyday glass. The glass that goes into your bottle in your house is made to harden very quickly, so a machine can make 1,000 bottles an hour. Our glass has basically the same ingredients, except it's made to harden slowly, so we can shape it by hand. So we're getting ready to pour the mold. Ben, in the red and white hat, takes a big steel ladle. He's going to scoop out a big blob of molten glass and pour it into the mold that Mr. Paley created. It's going to take more than one ladle to fill that mold. He's just placing some rods of colored glass into the molten glass, and those will be stripes. He's sprinkling a little powdered glass onto the top. He's going to add some more stripes. Those are red glass stripes. So we'll let that glass cool a little bit until it's stiff enough to hold its own shape, and then we'll pick it up with the square post that Gabe in the center has. Gabe is the man in the center with the black hat. Ben has taken our post, Ben in the red and white trucker's cap, and he's taken the steel pipe and placed it in a thing called the pipe cooler. We're spraying cold water on the metal pipe to cool it down, make it easier to hold. Now he's going to use that post to grab the casting. letting it rest on the metal table, cool it down a little more so that it'll retain its shape. Oh, I'm sorry, graphite table. Does anybody have any questions? So we're going to make two of these shapes and join them together. Mr. Paley is setting up the mold for the second shape. Sarah is making the post, which we're going to use to pick it up. Today's January 20th, I think. On the 21st, Mr. Paley is going to be auctioning off some of his older work and drawings and prints at the Rago, R-A-G-O auction house in Lambertville, New Jersey. There'll be, if you're interested in purchasing some work, you can post bids online. That's R-A-G-O. Well, when they first pick up those castings, they're pretty floppy, but as we get a little further on the process, they'll be stiff, and it won't be so crucial. Yeah, because they're hot. The casting is much hotter than the glass that's holding.
How much of a how much is it a problem that if they might lose this?
Oh, it takes a bit of skill to manage that wobbly glass,
Yeah.
but it depends on top of it.
Oh, I know that. But I just.
No, that's all he just took metal here, and he's just piecing together out of stuff we have. Oh, we do that, yeah, we do that all the time. Yeah. So over on the far right, Ben and Sarah are making the square post to pick up the second casting. So we're going to cast a similar wedge shape. And join the two together. Yes, sir. He's got little rods of colored glass, and he placed a couple of them in there, and those are going to form lines in the final casting. That's iron filings. The iron filings, they bubble up, they make little pattern of bubbles in the glass. I don't know, but probably. So we'll let that casting set up a little bit. And then we'll pick it up on the squarish post. You guys have any questions? You guys have any questions?
What temperature is the boiling hole?
Boiling hole 2300 degrees Fahrenheit. 2300 Fahrenheit. About 6.5 times what it takes to cook a turkey. So we're releasing the clamps. And now we're going to pick up our casting. Yes, ma'am. Why is he flipping it? Because the glass is soft and it's flopping around, so he's countering it by turning it in the other direction. So if it drops this way, then you turn it over and then it drops back on center. Oh, they wear it for grip. When they make a big thing like this, that's really floppy. It takes a lot of torque.
Oh, I get you. So it's not so much heat protection.
No, with this instance, no, it's not heated. It's for grip. They're baseball. They're gloves you wear in a batting cage. That's what they are. They're baseball pins. Yes. Speak loudly. We're making a sculpture designed by our guest artist, Albert Paley. So the edges of these forms cool quickly, and you'll see the glass blowers taking the torches and warming up the edges. Sarah's just running the propane and oxygen torch along the edges to make them extra warm so they don't crack. We're going to join these two pieces at a sort of 90-degree angle. We're going to jam the two pieces together sort of like this. So they're heating up, glass here, glass here. We're going to jam the two things together. The torches that they're using are propane and oxygen torches. They have a 5,000 degree flame. They enable us to get the glass very hot very quickly in a small area. So at the center bench, Nick is heating up the area where we're going to jam the two together. At the bench on the far right, Sarah's heating up the area we're going to jam them together. That'll do two things. It'll make that area soft, so the two will fold where we jam them together, but also the two will stick to each other. Hi. Yes, ma'am. How do you color the glass? When you first cook the glass up, you add different metals to make different colors. If you cook it up with cobalt, it turns blue. If you cook it up with a little gold, it turns pink. So it's different metals cooked into the glass that make it the different colors. Sarah's winding on a little glass around the end of the steel pole. That'll keep that connection warm temporarily. We call that a wrap. Put a little wrap around the So here we go. When they feel those are stiff enough, we're going to drip a little water on one of the poles. Little tap, off it comes.
Yes. Because it's not.
Why is she torching it? The glass, where the glass attaches to the metal pole, that's very fragile. It doesn't go as far into the furnace as the rest of it, so it doesn't get heated up as much. If that glass gets too cold, it'll crack spontaneously. So we go back and we heat up that joint with the torch. Well, she's heating up the joint, and we're also using the torches to warm up the edges, because the edges, those sharp edges, have a tendency to cool, and those can crack also. So we'll go and heat up the edges and the back.
And they shove it back in because they want to heat it again and
We want to heat the whole object. We want it, once we have all the parts, everything's where it's supposed to be, then we want to try and equalize the temperature. So we go back and forth, in and out a little bit, and until we get the uniform temperature inside and out. Then we put it away. Recycle our clear glass. You can't recycle our color. This is all, well, this is not all clear. Some red lines and stuff, so you can't, you can only recycle the clear one. You guys have any questions? That was a good answer. Yes. I'd say, I'm just guessing, but maybe 35, 40 pounds. But that's just a guess. Gabe says more. Gabe says 55 pounds, and he's been picking it up, so I take Gabe's word. Piece with two wedges that were attached, or with four wedges that were attached kind of like this. What? I don't know him that well. Be okay with it. It wasn't wild either way. Right now, what they're trying to do is kind of equalize the temperature. They're doing three things. One, they're making sure that the connection to the metal pole stays warm. Two, They're making sure that where the glass is touching, that those joints are completely melted in. And then they're also trying to make sure that the whole sculpture in general is a uniform temperature before we put it away.
Otherwise it would crack.
Yes, the things are radically different temperatures. One part contracts, pulls on the other, and it'll break it. So we want to make it kind of equal temperature. We want it to cool down to the point where it'll be completely hard and no longer change shape. We're adding another piece to this one, or that's the next? Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, Mr. Paley is going to be giving a talk here in our hot shop. We'll be streaming it to the web, so if you guys want to watch it from home, go to museumofglass.org and click on live glassmaking, and we'll be streaming the talk from here in our hot shop. Mr. Paley has a long, distinguished career, and he's done a lot of things, and so it should be pretty interesting to see all that. You guys have any questions? Do we make the glass right here? No, we buy the glass in the form of little pellets and shovel it into our furnace. We buy it already cooked up. So we're getting fairly close to the point where we're going to take it off the metal rod. We're ready to take it off. We're going to rest it on this contraption here. This is called we call it the farm equipment. We're going to roll it around and back to our annealing oven, and then we'll break it off back there. We're ready to break it off. We'll take a pair of tweezers and dip them in water, drip water where we want it to break, and we'll tap on the pipe, and off it'll come. You may also use a wet file. Sometimes we'll score it with a wet file. Make sure it breaks cleanly. So you guys will see them rested on the farm equipment, and then we're going to roll it into the back, and I don't think we have any cameras back there. Looking at the color of the glass a little bit, but mostly it's good. So two of the glass blowers are suiting up. They're putting on some protective clothing. The silver jacket and hood are made out of Kevlar. Kevlar is a fire-resistant, not fireproof, but fire-resistant material and a great insulator. So they're going to try and hold that as little as possible. That thing is around 1,000 degrees right now. It's got a lot of mass, so it's radiating a lot of heat. Go ahead, take pictures. So here we go. We use that bar to help Gabe lift it. Place it on the yoke. Into the back. We're going to drip a little water on the place we want it to break. Give it a tap. Off it comes. We'll melt the little edge and into our oven to cool overnight. So wait till they come back around. Give them a big, so they can hear your applause. They'll be back in a second. Okay, let's have a big hand for the Museum of Glass Hot Shop team and our guest artist, Albert Paley. We have Ben Cobb, Nick Davis, Sarah Gilbert, Sayuri Fukuda, and did I leave anybody out? Gabe Feenan. Those are little pieces of glass that we give away to little kids. Unfortunately, they're not ready to give away. I have to stand the edge. I'm all out of the ones to give away right now.
Yeah, I'm Albert Paley. I live in Rochester, New York, where I have my main studio. I have 18 people full-time, and we're involved primarily in large-scale metal sculpture. And in addition to that, we're involved with exhibition pieces, which employ forging, fabrication, and various metalworking processes. Yeah, the inspiration for the work is kind of difficult to figure out because obviously it's based on everything. My own sensibilities plus what I've experienced along the way. My work has a tendency to deal with complexity. With large-scale pieces, everything has to be resolved within the model of the maquette before we commit to the large scale. When I'm doing exhibition pieces, which are more for my own experience trying to understand form, there's usually no drawings. We just start and the work is composed as you go. The residency here in the museum is very exciting in the respect that most of my work deals with relationships of opposites. Opposites of form, but also opposites of materials. Each material has its own connotation. Even though we're designing and developing the glass form, that glass form will only be one element into a composition of the sculpture. My main thing is just to explore form, to try to find forms that are unique to the materials, obviously with glass here. And one thing interesting with the steel is that the form of the steel is created by heat, and the form that's created for the glass is by heat. So even though the materials are quite different, there's a similar response. So what I'm doing is I'm drawing upon my past experience of plastic form, and with my basic understanding of how glass works and work with you, try to create forms that really express that plastic nature of form. I'd like to see the final sculptures that develop as a dialogue between the steel and the glass, and having it kind of an equal balance. So the sculpture has a unified experience, but within that experience there's a diversification. The same as music, you know, you develop rhythm, you have accent, counterpoint, that type of thing. And then this was the first piece that I did at Pilchuck. Wow. In the mid-90s, I was invited to Pilchuck as an artist in residence. And so I actually worked with gaffers and people doing casting. And I did my first body of work there. And I really liked the dialogue between the two materials. Because I like to work in large scale, I had met Martin, and I've had a couple of sessions with Martin in his own studio.
Oh my God, that's beautiful.
That's the ones we did at your
Yeah.
place. Of course, you know, with the various work that Martin has done, the most obvious here in Tacoma is the fountain, you know, incorporated with the museum. And the play of glass forms on top of the water is just fantastic. So when this opportunity came up for the Glass Museum here in Tacoma, I wanted to have Martin and his gaffers or his people working with us because of the scale of the work that we were doing. And because we had worked together before, we kind of understood the vocabulary and the working situations. So we're just trying to build on the strengths of the past. The team has been put together is really fantastic. The scale of the work that we've done is just amazing. And yeah, it's a great facility. I'm looking forward to the rest of the week.
That was pretty impressive, man. Beautiful piece.
Such sizes.
Yeah. Oh, it's really good.
So for those of you who just came in, our guest artist today is Albert Paley, the man on the phone on the far left. He's a sculptor. He normally works in metal. He's very famous for his metal work, but sometimes he makes sculptures that combine metal and glass. If you go across our lobby, we have a big, beautiful exhibition of his work combining metal and glass. So what we're going to be doing today is he's going to be working with our resident team of glass blowers, and they're going to make the glass parts of the sculpture. So they're making everything according to his design. When we invite artists who are not glass makers themselves, we have a crack team here, and the artist, the visiting artist, comes up with an idea, a design, and our crack team makes it. So these, we're going to make a sculpture that's going to have sort of two wedge-shaped pieces of glass jammed together. We're going to pick up each of those wedge-shaped pieces of glass on a solid glass post, and Sarah over on the right is making the first post. So could we show some of Mr. Paley's work up on the big screen so you can see some examples of the kind of things that we're doing?
Yeah, hello. Nice to see you. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer anything if anybody has any. Yeah, the question was how long I've been working with glass. Usually I'm involved with, my studio is mainly a metal sculpture studio, and we do a lot of that. And I don't have glass facilities, so I work with different people. Probably about 18 years I've been working with this combination. So I work in the studio here, and then I bring the glass back, and then I look at it, and that becomes the basis of a sculpture or a composition. So the impetus is with the glass. So if the glass has a certain gesture or quality or whatever, I try to have the metal sympathetic to that. If you take a look at the exhibition up there, that's one thing that's consistent with the majority of those. So, yeah. Okay, nice and cool up there. It's a little warm down here, so.
Did you find your book? The book is
Yeah,
over
I
there.
got it.
So Mr. Paley started out working with jewelry and small-scale metalsmithing. In the 70s, he got some commissions to do very large-scale monumental sculptures. If you go to the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., and you go to the Renwick Gallery, you'll see a beautiful set of gates that Mr. Paley made. The Renwick Gallery, it's part of the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. That was a major turning point in Mr. Paley's career, and since then he's been doing a lot of large-scale sculpture, but he also does sort of smaller exhibition-style sculptures, and you can see our exhibition here across the hall. So each time we dip our pipe into the molten glass, so it's only a certain amount of glass that sticks. So each time we dip it in, we round it out, we let it cool a little bit, and then we'll dip it in again to get more glass. So over on the left, or crossing the studio to the right, is Sarah Gilbert. She's one of our resident team of glassblowers. When we have a guest artist, especially when the guest artist is not from the glass world, we have a crack team of glassblowers who can make whatever they design. Do you guys have any questions? Yes, sir. Let's see. We started at 2. I'm thinking hour and a quarter, hour and a half. But then we're just going to make the glass part, and then he's going to make the metal back in his studio, and that might take weeks. So, but the glass part will be probably an hour and a half, something like that. You guys have any questions?
Not me. Do you have any questions?
Think of one.
Think of a good one first.
Do you guys have any questions? Anything you want to know? Nope. Well, you think about it. If you think of something, you let me know. Yes, ma'am. I'm thinking 10 days to 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. It has to be cooled very, very slowly. When the thicker things get and the more complicated they are with thick and thin parts, the longer we have to take to cool them. The biggest piece of glass, do we have the telescope slide? That might be old and put away somewhere. But the biggest piece of glass ever made was the reflecting mirror for the Mount Subaru telescope. And that was 27 feet across, 8 inches thick, and they had to cool it for over 3 years to prevent it from breaking. There it is. If you look on the top of that picture, just to the right of center, those are people. That gives you an idea how big that piece of glass is. There's 2 kinds of furnaces. The ones that hold the molten glass, they're on 24/7. Those are the ones with the doors closed. The round ones with the doors open, those are called glory holes. Those are for heating and softening the glass. They have no glass in them. Those are only on during the working day. There's glass in the ones, there's 2 of them where you see the square hole in the steel wall and the door closed. And there's another one on the opposite side. That's where they take it out, yep. Could we play the color overlay video?
The color in glass comes from adding various materials to the mixture of raw ingredients called batch. Most of the colorants are compounds containing some kind of metal. For example, adding cobalt to clear glass creates a deep blue. Tin and antimony can be used to create white glass, and gold chloride can produce a rich red or pink colored glass. Colored glass is melted in furnaces, just like clear glass, and then is usually rolled into bars for storage and easy application. In order to apply color bar to a bubble, we first need to preheat the color to approximately 950 or 1000 degrees Fahrenheit in a color oven or garage. Once warm, the color is then picked up on the end of a punty rod using a little bit of clear glass as a support. The color is then heated in the 2300 degree glory hole to soften it and make it malleable, while another artist creates a small bubble of clear glass on a blowpipe. Once warm, the color is dropped over the clear bubble, and then using a variety of hand tools or the steel marver, the color is rolled back over the clear in an even layer. This process is called dropping color, or creating a color overlay. Depending on the project, that bubble is then usually gathered over with clear glass and blown into the final form. The finished product may appear to be all made from colored glass, but when viewed in cross-section, we can see that there is only a thin layer of color sandwiched between many layers of clear glass.
How long do they normally like do an apprenticeship before they actually get to
There is no formal system here in the United States.
I grew up in Germany and I know there's an apprenticeship
In
program.
Germany, they have technical glass high schools,
Right.
and it's a much more formal system. That really doesn't exist here.
So it's just learn as you go then.
Some people learn at work, some people learn in school. Gabe. Where'd Gabe go?
The guy we were just.
Guy, the black guy. Yeah, he learned entirely at work. Got a job in a glass shop in his early 20s. Sarah learned at art college at the Rochester. People come through different ways, but there's no formal system. You guys have any questions? He's making a mold. The sculpture's gonna consist of two kind of wedge-shaped slabs. So he's kind of jury-rigging a mold. He's clamping together pieces of metal. We're gonna pour molten glass in there to make the wedge. What? Yeah. Yeah, like, probably 5 minutes away. You guys have any questions? Hey, do you have any questions that you'd like to know? This silver oven with the curved side, that's called the garage. That's where we park stuff until we're ready to use it. It's a warming oven. It operates about half the temperature of the furnaces. It's hot enough to keep something from breaking, but it's not so hot it makes it soft. So if we make something in advance, we put it in the garage, keep it warm. We're ready to use it. We pull it out, heat it up a little extra. How do we make the little horses? I have a little video and show you. If you look up on the big screen, you'll see a little video on how we make the little ponies. Now you know how to make one. You go home and make one for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, Jackie's oven, right? That is awesome. Look at that. Look how fast it is. There's his tail. No, you can't make one with your mom. You need a 1,000-degree oven. Have that. Well, the oven in the house will make 1,000 degrees.
Rub two sticks together really hard.
Yeah.
This is what they look like.
Isn't that beautiful?
You can touch it if you like. I'm hanging on to it.
How soft it is, Chris. Beautiful.
You can make all sorts of fun stuff out of glass.
Beautiful.
You made dragons. You made musical instruments.
Want to make sure we got it here before he does that.
So we're going to transfer the post, the kind of squared off solid chunk of glass, from the rod it was originally formed on to a second steel rod called the punty. The second steel rod is going to act as a handle to hold the sculpture while we assemble it. So while Ben in the red and white hat and Gabe in the black hat are dealing with the post, Mr. Paley is warming up the mold. How many? How what?
How many different types of glass can you mold?
Types of glass?
Types of glass?
Types.
Well, I mean, we only use one basic type of glass
Oh.
here.
Okay.
I mean,
How do you
you
get
could theoretically use a million different types.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah.
Because like I work with clay, and there's like a lot of different types of clay. that
Oh,
you can-
there are different types, but
Right.
we just use one base glass for everything.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
how do you get the color in when you're coloring it?
Colors of glass, you really only color glass when you first cook it up from scratch. You add, most of the colorants are metal, not all of them, but most of them. So if you cook up the raw ingredients of glass with cobalt, you get blue, chromium, you get green, a little bit of gold, you get pink. It's mostly metal dissolved in the glass when you first cook it up.
In the fused metal and art glass, a
corrugated metal sheet. Poke it. A million ways. It's when the glass is hot and soft, and you can impress anything you want. So we're getting ready to do the pour to make the first of our 2 wedges. Ben, with the red and white cap, he's going to take his ladle, dip it into our furnace, fill it with molten glass, and he'll bring it over to the mold and pour it in. It's going to take 2 ladles full. So Nick is going to get the second ladle. Mr. Paley's sprinkling on some iron filings and placing some rods of glass in the middle to make stripes. When we coat the iron filings with another layer of molten glass, the iron filings will bubble up and make a series of tiny little bubbles. So we'll leave the glass in the steel mold for a little bit so that it cools a bit and stiffens and will be able to retain its shape. You want some bubbles? No, just see the bubbles.
Like working together? Like do they each have like a specified job? They just kind of know how to. Wow. Yeah, they don't really seem to be talking about it. They just seem to know what they need.
They are talking more than you think because the studio is so loud you can't hear them giving each other instructions to stay off. These guys have an average of 20 years. Clean living and pure thought.
I'm sure that's what it is. Yeah.
So Ben there has got 24 years. So there, wait a little bit, and so the connection between the post and the wedge stiffens up a little bit, so he can handle it more easily. So Nick, in the backwards hat, is using a torch and heating up the edges. Those edges have a tendency to crack, and so we're focusing the heat on them, warming them up so they don't crack. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir. Yes. There's 2 kinds of casting. There's called hot casting and kiln casting. This is hot casting where we actually take a ladle full of glass and pour it in like making a Jello mold. Kiln casting is when we make a mold, place it in an electric oven, place chunks of glass on it, and heat the whole thing up till the glass melts and fills the mold.
How much does that piece weigh?
I'm thinking 25 pounds, maybe 30.
Now, what are they going to do about to hit the vice grips with the chunk in it? Will they float that out? Well, when it flipped over, it hit the vice grips and it put a big chunk in it. Flat. Oh. If you look at it, you'll see it. It's a big bar.
Yeah, he's going to soften that melt and work it in a little bit.
Yeah, because when he flipped it, he caught the thing and it took the chunk out. Like, oh,
Stuff like that happens.
yeah. I figured you'd work it out and let it.
What?
What are they going to do with the other one over there? Are they going to attach it to that one too?
We're going to make another one. Oh, each one of those. So each one of these sections we're going to make what we call a post. That's what Sarah has. And then the wedge which we're casting. So she's making the second post. We're going to take two of them. Let's see. Here. So we're going to make two wedges and stick them together as two posts. So right now we have this post and the wedge. We're going to make the same thing again, and we're going to jam the two parts together. Thanks for coming in, guys. Good. Glad you enjoyed it. So right now, Mr. Paley is heating up the mold where we're going to cast the second wedge. The glass that's around the end of the metal pipe is fragile. If that glass starts to cool, it's going to try and contract around the steel and it's going to split. As long as it's warm and a little bit tough, everything will be okay. Well, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, yeah. So, yeah. That glass is probably about 1100 degrees. a size line where he combines metal and glass. So when he goes to a glass shop where he needs glass parts made. You want to look at the. We have
Heating it before or the last one? Was I heating? Yeah. I was doing the torching before we stuck it together. Yeah, because that last one we did, the first one, the first kind of edge was cold. Yeah. We try to get that little hot. Okay. Because, I mean, yeah, and the thing is that this one didn't deform that much, and then it really did, so let's get a little more of the process.
So how much glass is in these things?
each one of them holds 1,000 pounds,
1,000 pounds? Really?
which isn't as much glass as you think, because glass is very heavy. Glass.
Each one of those wedges, about how much would they weigh?
I'm thinking they're about 25 pounds, maybe another 5 pounds for the post.
So like 30 pounds, yeah. So when they attach,
Yeah. Well, and just the thing is, all the weight is way out on the end of that pole. So, yeah, 20 pounds of groceries is not that much, but try to weigh groceries with a fishing pole,
Right.
and it's another deal entirely. So once the two things get put together, it's going to be really heavy.
and so do they put this on display afterwards?
You know, he's a famous artist. He has exhibitions all over the world. I don't know where this will go.
Does the process of casting it make that crinkle pattern in the wedge? It's not clear.
Well,
Like a couple of things.
if you wanted to cast it completely smooth, you could. But Mr. Kelly wants it textured. Also, when he put in 2 scoops of malt glass, and then he sprinkled it with iron filing, and then put another scoop of malt glass over that. And when you do that, the iron filings between the layers bubble up, and so there's a little layer of tiny bubbles as well that he put in for texture.
Who's the artist? Veronica.
The older guy.
Okay. Yeah, the stuff over in pretty amazing. It's over in
Yeah, that's all Mr. Paley.
yeah.
There was something that red. Let me see what he has here.
Oh, we just take it, we make a piece of red glass, and then we just dip it in.
What's the scale for?
Don't worry, guessing. Minus 14, 49, 49, 49 pounds. So the glass and the pipe yeah, 86 plus 14 is 200, plus 35 is 49, if my math is correct. So the pipe and the glass together weigh 49 pounds. Now we're about to cast the second wedge. Ben scoops up a ladle full of molten glass and pours it into our steel mold. What? He's putting in little rods of colored glass like this to make lines. He's sprinkling the iron filings and then pouring molten glass over that. The iron filings will bubble up, have a layer of tiny bubbles. Do you guys have any questions?
Is he really 6'3"? I fished with this guy in Mexico like 10 years ago, and the week before that I fished with him, he fished with Donald Trump. What do you say?
So now we're getting ready to pick up the wedge. Ben is coming over with the post. We're going to flop it on the table a little bit till that connection stiffens up, until the wedge itself stiffens up. Until we can move it around comfortably. So glass is kind of like wax. The hotter you get it, the softer it gets. The cooler it gets, the stiffer it gets. So as we let it cool off and it'll start to get, the shape will start to get stiffer and stiffer. Yes, it's the glow from the heat. Yep. It'll be clear except for the little red lines that he stuck in there. Yes. Oh, they're keeping the glass warm until we're ready to join the two pieces. If we let it get if we just let that cool off, it'll crack. So we're keeping the first one we made warm, and then we're going to get this one squared away. Then we're going to heat the two of them up and jam them together. Yeah, as long as it's clear, you can throw it back in. Nope, we're just going to get them hot and jam them together. He'll distort, but that's what he wants. You know, I have to ask Mr. Paley. I don't know. So Mr. Paley said that he uses metal patinas, which are chemical treatments on the surface, for some of the colors, and for other colors, the kind of more opaque solid colors, they're automotive paints. Yeah, the kind of paints that would go on your car. Patinas, they're chemical treatments of metal surfaces. You see, like when you have a bronze statue that has this kind of blue-green, that's a chemical treatment. It's called a patina. It's not a color, but it chemically affects the surface of the thing and makes a colored surface. Well, they're trying not to at this point. Yeah, they're just trying to keep it warm, stiff. Just before they put the two of them together, then they'll get them hot, soft, and floppy and jam them together. Right now, it's just trying to maintain it while that other one gets made. So now we have our two sections. And on both benches, we're taking the torches and heating up the center of each of those wedges. And then we're going to jam the two of them together. They're going to distort, but that's what Mr. Paley wants. So you can see Sarah and Nick have the propane oxygen torches, and they're concentrating the heat on the front end and the middle, right that center section. Glass is a very bad conductor of heat, so you can get one part of the glass very hot and soft without affecting the rest of it. So those center sections will be much softer than the outsides. The thing that makes it awkward is that weight is so far out of the end. So that piece of glass right there, the glass and the pipes only weigh about 50 pounds total. But you got like 25 of those way out in the end. Real hard. Everybody hates moving a mattress, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not because mattresses are so heavy. It's because you have to exert so much energy keeping them from flopping around. Right. The same is true for this.
Yeah, you can.
There's a lot of torque. Physical strength involved. When we make something this big, so I think we're pretty close. So here we go. Get out of your way. So now that we have the two pieces joined, the sort of heating of this becomes rather complicated. We want to ideally get this all to one uniform temperature. The edges have a tendency to cool quicker. That's why you see them going over those with the torch, warming them up. The center stays hot while the surface cools quicker. We also want to make sure that where they're joined, they're completely melted together, so that's not a point of stress. So we'll be going in and out a whole bunch of times, trying to equalize the temperature before we put this away. No, we don't put it away till it's completely hard. Well, this is probably more like a week, 10 days. The floors of those ovens are brick. If we think it's going to get scratched or something, we can put ceramic fiber blanket, which is a modern day replacement for asbestos. It's a soft, fluffy thing. We can put that down. But we don't actually put it away till it's hard. We'll let it cool till it's hard, just like it's hard at room temperature. So we'll let it go down to about 1,000 degrees, approximately. Experience. You get some clues looking at the color. You can watch it. If you stop turning it, if it's still a little soft, it'll start to sag. But it's basically an educated guess when the thing is ready to go away. Do you guys have any questions? One at a time. I'm here till 5. Well, if you look at that sculpture they're working on now, it's got two kind of squarish posts that on opposite ends, and that's what they were making when you were here. The part that, attaches to the wedge. We cast the wedge in the center. We made a little mold out of steel, and we poured molten glass in it. So kind of like a big Jello mold. You guys have any questions?
Just out here, just trying to figure out what's going on. That's like one part of the sculpture that you're eventually putting.
Yeah, the guest artist is Albert Paley.
Yep.
And
You see the gallery. It's really amazing.
okay, yeah. So you can see that the sculptures have, a glass part and metal. So we're making the glass part.
Okay.
So we're kind of almost done with this. Trying to let the thing
And
cool.
it's already been measured so it kind of fits into.
No.
This is the first part. Then you make the metal.
Make the glass first, and then you design the metal around it.
Does the metal go in different galleries? Do you do metal here or just glass?
Just do glass. He's going to take it back to his metal shop in Rochester and fabricate all the metal. He's basically a metal sculptor, not a glass sculptor. You guys have any questions? No, I think they're going to leave them on, and they're going to use those to mount metal. Yeah, to mount so whatever, there'll be a tube or something that will go into that metal. at reheating, the the interior gets cooler and the outside gets hotter, and so we're trying to bring it till they're both kind of the same, and then we'll put it. The whole building is designed to act like a giant chimney. So there's a natural updraft to take the heat and smoke away from the furniture. Now, reason number 3 is historical. Along this waterway, before the museum was here, there were a number of sawmills. The sawmills had big conical metal outbuildings where they burned the waste wood from the sawmills to dry the lumber. Those buildings, yeah, those were called wigwam burners in a less politically correct time. And when the architect Arthur Erickson saw those, pictures of those, that's what gave him the idea to build the building in the shape. So we're getting pretty close. You can see some of our glass blowers are putting on some protective clothing on the right. That silver jacket and yellow gloves are made out of Kevlar. Kevlar is a heat-resistant insulating material. We'll break the glass away from the original metal pipe and we'll place it in our annealing oven where it will cool over a period of maybe a week to 2 weeks. Little tiny things.
They work here all the time.
Yep.
The artists change.
The artist change.
I thought this was a team that came with Haley.
Our guy. Ben's been here for 15 years. Dave's been here for 15 years. like 15 and a half years old.
Wow.
What?
That's why they work so well together.
Time flies by, but I'm really quiet.
Will be 16 in July.
All this car museum.
Car Museum is much newer. I don't know. Car Museum is probably 4 or 5 years old. 5.
I can't remember. Time flies by.
Was the space there at the car museum before?
I don't know what was there before.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
I really didn't pay much attention to the space until they built the car museum.
I didn't know until they had it done, or all of a sudden, oh wow, look at that building.
This will be reunited, isn't it?
Just went before we came here. I'm from Anchorage, Alaska, so I'm headed back, and I just had a long layover. They met me.
6 hours, like 6 or 7 hour layover.
Yeah, no, it's a good way to spend the day.
Yeah.
Think.
So what's a good place around here to eat?
It depends what kind of food you like.
Mediterranean type. Something Mediterranean.
There's nothing real close that's real Mediterranean. The place sort of at the end of the, go out the front door and go to your left. There's a place called The Social. And it's sort of a little bit of everything. You can get some shrimp there, you get some pasta, you can get salads. And it's, it's good. It's not great. There's a really good Thai restaurant up on Pacific Avenue. You go up the stairs and over the bridge. There's a stairs that circle this road. And then you walk across the bridge on Pacific Avenue. And you go to the left about 2 blocks. There's a restaurant called Indochine. Indochine, like Indocchine. And they're a really good Thai. Right at the end of the bridge, there's a place called Anthem, which is like a sandwich shop. Good sandwiches. Getting an artistic inspiration.
Is he good?
Either that or he's writing a love note.
Is that your phone number?
Huh? Nothing. So we're going to transfer the glass to that big rolling yoke we call the farm equipment. We'll roll it to the edge of the studio, and then we'll break it off the metal pipe. We'll take a wet file and score the glass where we want it to break. We'll drip some water on that. The cold water will hit the hot glass, crack it, and then a sharp tap will release it. The 2 glass blowers in protective clothing will be ready to catch it.
He's dripping some water on. Little tap. Off it comes. We'll melt the little sharp edge and into the annealing oven. So hold, whoa, whoa. Wait till they come out. They'll come around the corner so they can hear you clapping. They'll be back in a second.
Well, we have another oven like that back there. What?
Okay, let's have a big hand for the Museum of Glass Hot Shop team and for our guest artist, Albert Paley. Mr. Paley will be giving a talk tomorrow at 2 o'clock here in the Hot Shop. And obviously most of you won't be here, but you can watch it online if you go to the museumofglass.org and click on live glassmaking. So thank you all for coming. We hope you had a good time, found it interesting. So that concludes our demonstrations for today. We'll be working again at 12 on Sunday. Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for coming in.